There are still about 6.5 months before the Iowa caucuses kick off the 2020 presidential campaign, but that doesn't stop us from trying to figure out who's in the lead. I'm Ed O'Keefe, political correspondent for CBS News, joined by Anthony Salvanto, our director of elections and surveys, out with the newest Battleground Tracker poll. Reams of data about where exactly things are headed, and we wanted to start by focusing specifically on who exactly is ahead in these early states of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Texas, and California, because you surveyed the 18 states that hold contests up until March 3rd, Super Tuesday.
And the reason we do that, just to set the context for everybody, is that this year is a little bit different. Now, people might be used to saying, okay, it's a presidential campaign, everybody goes to Iowa, and then we'll see what happens from there. But with so many big states moved up on the calendar that come 6-7 months from now, there's going to be a giant pool of delegates that everybody's going to be fighting over in these 18 states. So let's start with Iowa, where you do see Biden in the lead with first choice preference, but this is a very tight race. There's been a top tier really defined now across all of these states for the most part, and that is Biden, and it is Warren, and it is Sanders, and it is Harris. All of those candidates right now are in a position to get delegates, which means they'd get at least 15% of the vote. They're doing okay in at least some of the regions of these states where delegates can be won and lost.
It's important to remind voters of that. Anyone who gets 15% or better wins something in every one of these contests.
Democratic contests are not winner take all. They give out some delegates to the top finishers. And that's another reason why people say there might be candidates hanging around this race, because you can get delegates even if you finish second, finish third. Well, move on to New Hampshire then. Comes after Iowa. Well, there you've also got Joe Biden, but you've got a much tighter race again than we saw a month ago. Harris in the mix, Warren in the mix, all in a position maybe to get some delegates. The place where Biden still stands out as being particularly strong is South Carolina.
It's really kind of a race for number 2 in South Carolina at this point.
It really is, and it stands apart in that regard. Look, Joe Biden is doing very well with African-American voters. He has been since the beginning of this campaign. That helps him in South Carolina, where they probably make up a majority of the Democratic electorate.
So you see no softening of his support in South Carolina in the midst of this conversation about his work with segregationist senators, his opposition to a federal role in busing, nothing that suggests it's softened?
No, not really. In fact, we even asked it, and people who support him think his record on race has been good. And so in that regard, he's still sort of standing on that long track record in the minds of those African-American voters. Now, the place where I think it gets really interesting is we start to go out to Texas and California, as you mentioned, because there's another set of states with a diverse set of an electorate. And here you've got in Texas, Beto O'Rourke, who's not doing well nationally, not doing well in the other states, but he's kind of hanging around in a position to get some delegates. And in Texas, and then you go out to California and you see Kamala Harris, that's her home state. She's very close to Biden in top preference, and she's also in a position to get some delegates.
And somebody watching this thinks, wait, Texas and California, why do we care? I said March 3rd earlier, Super Tuesday, it's March 6th, and both of these states have moved up to that date. More than 500 delegates, I think, up for grabs that day.
Yeah.
There's 3,700 delegates roughly that get seated at the convention in Milwaukee next year. You need to win about 1,880 of those delegates in order to win the nomination. California and Texas, again, given the proportionality rules, you could see 2 or 3, 4 people walk out of those states with something in the bag that allows them to keep going into March and April, which is part of why so many people are running, A, and why someone like O'Rourke and Harris think they've got a shot if they can win, place, or show in those first 4 states before they get to their home states.
And it also speaks to the fact that the candidates have to go out and talk to a diverse array of voters. So we talked about Biden with African Americans. There's certainly going to be the Hispanic vote, but also within the Democratic coalition, you've got working class Democrats and you've got more affluent Democrats who also tend to be more liberal. Some call themselves very liberal. Those voters are leaning a little bit more towards a Warren or a Sanders in the mix there with Biden, whereas Biden doing better in a lot of these states with working class voters, with voters who call themselves moderate Democrats. And it's all those coalitions you see arrayed out across all of these states, not just in Iowa, that you have to pay attention to.
With the minute we have remaining, remind people this isn't just a horse race poll. you're doing something else with all of this data.
Yeah, it's a model, and by a model we mean we take into account a lot of variables about the districts, about the kind of people who live in those districts, as well as the preferences expressed by voters in what is, frankly, a really massive poll across all of these states. So what we do is we take all that data, we match it to voter files, the types of people who live in all of these places, to come up with an estimate of what the delegate count would be, because as we said at the top, that's what matters, and that's how the campaigns are going to look at this. That's where they're knocking on doors, that's where they're trying to advertise. They're looking at the whole map, so we have to too.
If you want to dive into the data yourself, you can do so at cbsnews.com. I'm Ed O'Keefe with Anthony Salvanto. Thanks for watching.